This is going to be a short one. I took geology whenever I was whenever I went to the University of New Mexico as part of my science series that they require of your bachelor's degree. A bachelor's degree, mine was, I think it was 80 credit hours, or it was some crazy amount. It was like 120 credit hours, I think it was altogether. And some of that included a credit hour is a course is about three to four credit hours, and the what the credit hour really represents is the time of a class that you have per week. We'd have 4 hours, 3 hours per week, three classes per week or something like that, and you would attend, and those amount to about 3 or 4 credits. And so 3 credit hours is 3 credit hours per week per semester. A semester is about it's half a year at UNM. It's going to be the fall, and that's going to be every month from it starts in September or late August and works through towards December. And then I think there's a semester that's after Christmas, so it's like about 4 months or so, 4 or 5 months. It's 4 months, and I'm pretty sure of that. And then you get another, so it breaks up into threes. There's also summer school, which if you get like 3 or 4 credit hour course, it's like double the work that you get in the average semester. It's more work than, and so, but that's because you've got summer. There's going to be fewer students, and so anyhow, I to get my bachelor's degree took me a good decade because of my problem with aphasia. It's hard for me to take anything more than 3 or 4 courses per semester, and I mean 3 or 4 is like really challenging. I usually take only 1 or 2, and I don't even work while I'm doing that. I mean, if you look among people who have learning problems or learning differences, a good bit of them never go to college. And it was actually expressed to me, don't go to college. This is not good for you. You're not going to benefit from it. You're not going to find a career in it. It would be better for you probably go to a technical school. Don't go to college. Was pretty much the message I was getting from what do they call them, the consultants they have in school. They're yeah, they got a name. You go to them, and then they suggest a course of education to take. But anyhow, counselors, you go to a college counselor, and the counselors I saw said, don't do it, don't pursue it. You know, associate's degree is fine. Don't pursue a bachelor's. Don't pursue a graduate degree. You don't have the capacity to do this in any short amount of time. You're going to waste a good decade of your life. And I did, but I don't see it as a waste. And even though I didn't really get employed doing it, I still feel like the area of education that I got developed my ability to manage complexity and complex ideas. I have a mind for design. I know of solutions that I could bring to the forefront, such as the ability to create peer-to-peer healthcare informatics systems. But I'm just not going to pursue it because the same systems could also be used to track people. And I don't believe in creating technology that controls people. I do believe in technology that could be used by people, but I don't believe in technology that is used to control people. I see that as a pathway of evil. Um, and Anyhow, that aside, what I was originally going to talk about was I had that video that was on masturbation and it led up to creationism. I took geology in college, and one of the concerns that our instructor had, and our instructor was atheist, um, she expressed she told people that you can't really rely on the science and the geology to really describe things, because it will change in the future, and even the stuff that they adopted in the past, it doesn't even hold up today. And there are real problems. At the time that she was training us, she said there are real problems, things they can't explain in geology, or such as or in the uh, biohistory, the biological history, of how eukaryotes and prokaryotes came about. The idea of an organism that is the combination of two organisms that are fairly incompatible, one that eats stuff and produces nutrients and energy or whatever, or electrolytes or whatever it is, the stuff they produce that can be used by the other organism to mobilize it and find the food. And they don't know how long it took for these two organisms to come together. And um, using their explanation, they would think that by random happenstance, it would probably take 1 billion years. And because because they're so highly incompatible. Um, and we are that organism to a very large degree. We have a digestive tract that, if it was to ever get access to our other organs, would see the other organs as food, and we basically eat ourselves. The digestive system would eat us from the inside out. And that's the reason why there's always a great potential for infection. People who are into anal sex need to understand that the anal cavity is the part of the digestive system, and your dispelled blood comes through that part, and that's the reason why it's a common transport of disease. You can get hepatitis C and HIV through anal sex. There is no reason to be ever involved with the anal cavity, and even these fetishes that people are developing about licking the anus. I mean, really, if you're not familiar with this, this is a developing fetish in the and it's I think it's the porn industry that's really pushing it. There's nothing attractive about it that I can see, and nothing valuable or even pleasurable about it. It's really more comical than it is I can see it as being a fetish. It's just that people have such a desire to be perverted and disgusting, and what they don't understand is that they could really hurt themselves in all sorts of ways of being involved in that activity. And it is no leap of the imagination why in the Judeo-Christian worldview, the Bible would advise against anal sex. It's because It's for the reason that it is a conduit through for disease. It's you can't make it. The only way you can make it clean is by taking laxatives, irritant laxatives like a fleece enema to clear out the colon. But then there's the problem that if you get any kinds of like sperm or anything into that cavity, since you knocked out all the protective flora and the bile that protects the membranes, and the mucous membranes are all gone. Everything there that would be protective to the bowel system is gone. If you've got any fissures in your bowel, say even to anal sex, that the activity has led to fissures and lesions in your, I mean, not fissures but lesions in the skin or in the surface of the colon. It's going to be a great place to harbor disease, and you're putting yourself at risk. You're risking disease, and even the porn stars know that these activities that they're performing, of getting multiple guys to stick their dick in the ass of some girl, actually will kill a porn star. Will kill people. They know it is. They know it is very dangerous. And there's a documentary, I keep mentioning pornocracy, where they actually say that it's a relative concern that these acts are actually killing porn stars. They're killing people, and that to them it's really seen as a kind of a sexual Olympics. It's like it's a daredevil act, and the reason why I know about hepatitis C and HIV is because I was involved in the creation of websites that supported the organizations for hepatitis C. And being I know for certain that HIV and hepatitis C are incurable. And they were hepatitis C destroys your liver and other, I mean, it has other detrimental effects. Hepatitis C is what Dr. Kevorkian got, because whenever he was in medical school, he got this great idea to see if he could do a blood transfusion between him and a cadaver, and he acquired hepatitis C. I think it's what ultimately killed him, and the reason why he looks so freaky was as a result of that disease. And so, if you're into if you're one of these guys that are into bio hacking, Dr. Kevorkian is a perfect example of somebody who biohacked and failed. You have to be very careful. I took a class. I went into alt space where people were talking about biohacking, and the only guy that had really to look to as the poster child in that course was a guy who was using a glucose monitor. And I asked him, so what kind of diabetes do you have? And he said, I don't have diabetes. And he was using it to control his glucose, which he didn't need because he had a working pancreas. So what he was doing was he was doing double damage to himself by avoiding carbohydrates or anything that would produce any amount of effect on the blood sugar. So he was reducing blood sugar that was necessary for the organs to operate. Diabetes is when your pancreas fails to produce the necessary insulin to tell the organs to absorb the sugar that's in the bloodstream. So if you see spikes in the blood sugar of a normal person, stuff is going to get taken care of, but it's not going to get taken care of in a diabetic, and that's the difference. And so wearing a glucose monitor is really just stupid as fuck. You know, it's stupid people. It's stupid human tricks. And so, anal sex is stupid human tricks. You would be better off circle jerking if you're a homosexual than to do anal sex. I There's no pleasure that can be gained through anal sex unless somehow the brain was able to adapt the any kind of nerve endings you have in your colon to turn it into pleasure. There really is no pleasure in the sport, and you risk creating what are equivalent to um, is equivalent to varicose veins in the butt, and we call them hemorrhoids. Um, External, internal hemorrhoids that can't sit anywhere. Sometimes they poke out, and you have to go and sit on the edge of something sharp, like a brick or something. I know about this because this is when my dad had these problems with them, and older people get them, and they hate them. And there's nothing you can do about them other than go to the doctor and have them put a rubber band around them and hope that they just fall off. But people who are into anal sex get them all the time. I mean, and they have to use lubricant and all sorts of stuff, and it's really, I mean, they would get the same amount of satisfaction if they could just come up with some other way of having sex. Um, so anyhow, I mean, that's and I guess I talked about eukaryotes and prokaryotes and the mystery and geology that they don't have the answers and they know in the future that stuff is going to change and that how they date things, the reason why they date things is billions of years is because they use trace particles to trace dating of where a particle goes through. I think it's quartz or some sort of mineral, and the traces of the particles they use to determine the length of time and half lives of carbon dating, how long it takes for half the carbon to turn to lead, and things of that nature are all the various sorts of dating methods, and they each cover a certain amount of years. Um, and then you got tree ring is for like within the last 100 years, and then you've got fossils that are used in sediment to determine the date of certain sediment of like slate. You might find are they troglodytes or there's those little horseshoe crabs that are about the size of a couple of quarters or about a silver dollar or a quarter or whatever. They're those small little things you find in slate. And what slate is it's very fine silt mud that becomes extremely hard. It it petrifies and it leaves behind the form of these little horseshoe crab type creatures that were in the mud. Their bones no longer exist because they long ago since disintegrated, but what was left over was the form that the mud formed around their shell, and that's what the archaeologists dig up. Is in some cases they end up digging up not the actual bones of dinosaurs, but digging up the remnants of what was a bone at one time, but deteriorated away, and the the rock formed around it, the sediment formed around it, and um, retained its form. And then what they'll do is they'll drop some plaster of Paris inside of that, and pull the plaster out, and then they'll try to fabricate a bone based upon the shape that they get out of the cavity that they excavated. Um, and then they have to figure out how the bones go together to make these animals. And they've been able to architecturally create them. They've found some animals perfectly um, well preserved inside of mud flats and things like that. And I mean, places where there used to be swamp, and um, that the swamps became oil, but there was also sediment, and and they read the layers of the sediment, and they try to determine the way that the water was flowing at certain times. They'll use ash layers whenever there's like a volcanic activity will produce ash layers, and they'll use those for dating rock. Um, they will use the particles that of an asteroid, when a particular asteroid hit in or was it a meteor that hit in, it was asteroid that hit in Utah, that left that big old crater that they used in the movie Starman. That one produced a lot of particles that landed all over the earth, and it's well known, the sediment layer, um, and is used to date a lot of continental geology type stuff. And then there's other things they talked about in the geology course that was really uh, kind of entertaining, was the idea about what causes earthquakes, is and or a number of ways you can actually produce an earthquake in Colorado. The government in Denver got the wise idea to take all of their wastewater and inject it into the dry rock, and they created an earthquake, because the dry rock, what would be your fissile friction, that the rock would take time to get enough for lubrication to actually move. It would move slow because there was this dry rock, and the rock was fairly hard, and would take time. When they poured in all of this wastewater, it lubricated it and made earthquake. And then they learned from that, and they said, okay, we're not doing that shit again. But such mistakes bring about good examples of exactly the proof of the science, and that goes behind the theories they have about what causes earthquakes. And because they even though they have a science and understanding of it, they don't really have any way of going down into the surface and seeing what actually goes on. It's a lot of theory, even the theory of subducting ocean limestone into underneath the continent, and the idea that this limestone has very light oxygen, and that oxygen, as it subducts, has to escape to the environment, and how it does that is going through the rock. Then the rock melts, and I mean the limestone holds the carbon dioxide and oxygen and stuff. It comes up through the rock, and comes and is what forms the volcanic activity, and the ring of fire in the Pacific, and things of that nature. Um, Actually, the ring of fire is is not a result of subducting plates. It's of where magma produces new limestone plates, or I mean, produces more plates that then get covered with limestone, which is a result of the plankton that dies on the surface of the water. A lot of our limestone comes from dying plankton. This is these little fishes with these little shells, and the shells drop to the bottom, and that's what produces the ocean floor, the limestone on the ocean floor. And then that stuff subducts and produces our volcanoes. And then what produces the basins is the the volcanic activity um, causes the rock to get to get driven up, and as a result of that, the plasticity of the ground produces a basin, and also what produces a basin is the sediment that comes off the mountains and goes down the rivers and drops into the valley, and the weight of that sediment forces the ground to push down. And then there's other places, like the reason why Texas is not completely flat, it's kind of dome shaped, and what's causing that is that there is a fair amount of light magma underneath the surface that is pushing it up, but not hard enough to produce any actual volcanic stuff. It's just that it's very light rocks over a magma, a fairly light magma. That's what I had heard it was, and it tends to bow upwards, but it's not completely flat. It's kind of dome shaped. It's just a long flat dome shape is what Texas is. And in Albuquerque they got the Sandias, and the Sandias are a basin. They have a basin, but the Sandias are granite rock, and the granite is formed by volcanic. It's igneous, I think. It's a metamorphic rock, and it doesn't naturally occur on the surface. It occurs below the surface, and it came to be, the Sandias came to be through the upheaval of rock, and it's not that much different, I think, than what forms the Swiss Alps, which is also, I think, upheaval, rock upheaval. It's like the crust got broken and turned upwards, and something was pushing against it, and that's what caused it to create those those tall mountains. And but in the case of New Mexico and the Sandias, I don't think there was something pushing at the plate to upheave the Sandias. I think the result there was the breaking of the rock, or just the volcanic activity and it could have been from land pushing against each other. One thing that's known about New Mexico is it's got a lot of prehistoric um, archaeological digs, lots of places where dinosaurs died, and they're forever digging up bones here and there around New Mexico. And in fact, I knew a guy in college that claimed that there was somebody out on the highway that was selling dinosaur bones, which is considered to be illegal. And they had already gotten away with selling, thousands of dollars of archaeological finds, and before they got caught and were forced to stop doing it. So if you ever dig up anything like a dinosaur bone, don't go and sell it, because you could actually land you in jail. But anyhow, I took geology, and I didn't do well at it. I got a C, and the reason why is because I wasn't one of these kids who had atheistic or agnostic parents who were so bent on learning sciences and geology to train their kids to understand geology as a major science. and the kids knew going into the course what geology was, so it wasn't like it they were learning something new. And for me, it was very new, and it wasn't something that I got from my parents. So for me, it was a harder it was a harder obstacle for me to overcome, to get through that course. And of course, I think I came away with a lot more than maybe any of those guys can remember now. But that's because I tend to retain information better. Somehow my brain conceptualizes stuff better, or I don't know. But she expressed, and she said the reason why climate change is occurring, and she says um, um, car fumes and cow farts. She said cow farts. That was one of the others. So it was like fumes, and it was like CFOs, um, not chloro, um, fluorocarbons, CFCs, not CFOs. CFOs are corporate financial advisors, officers. Um, um, CEO is a chairman of financial, the chairman financial officer is a CFO. CFC, chlorofluorocarbons, um, or car, yeah. Is it chlorofluorocarbons? It's a fluorocarbons of some sort. But anyhow, the stuff that contributes to forming of that big hole in the sky, the ozone layer. And we got plenty of ozone on the ground if we could just get it pumped into the stratosphere, or way up there, where the ozone layer is. We could fix that hole, but it's just too difficult to pump ozone from down here up to there, And so we could fix the ozone layer if we could get ozone up there. Um, it's the carbon that's going up there and interacting with the ozone layer that's getting rid of the ozone. So if your carbon goes up and ozone is just oxygen, and the ozone and the carbon comes together, then you're going to get CO2, or or the CO2 goes up there, or breaks off an oxygen. You're going to deplete your ozone layer, and the ozone layer is what's protecting us from the solar winds or whatever. That's causing us to have a hotter climate, climate. And there are people that don't believe in the ozone layer, and I tell those guys, those loonies, that even if you don't believe in the ozone layer, or climate change, believe that people in other countries do pretty much everywhere else than America, and it's only in America where we don't believe this stuff. There's also the same loonies who won't take vaccines, and the same loonies who call themselves Christians but don't ever really learn any of the stuff that Jesus actually said, and understand that the fiscal conservatives don't give a jack shit about them. Anyhow, the thing is that if you get ambassadors to go to another country, and you're going to discuss anything that any of your needs, and you just express to the people there that you don't believe in climate change, they're going to use that as in weighting how much they're going to consider any of your concerns. And so it just doesn't make any sense politically to refute that climate change exists, because a lot of the world believes it does. And I'm willing to go that far. I'm not really big on evolutionism, because the what I see of evolutionism and what I believe of it is it's just really the combination of a lot of different evolutionary like ideas being clumped together to try to give relevance to the idea, and they're teaching people it, um, as if it's absolute truth, and it's going to be more detrimental to anything any of the Christians can do to our world, um, because people are going to get a lie, and then they're going to stop believing in anything. They're going to fail to believe that anything is true. And so we have to be very careful into what we accept as truth in the sciences, especially because people believe that it can be tested and proven, and when really only parts of it can be, and those parts are not really evolutionary. No, none of the evolution science that Darwin used, the idea that developed his theory of evolution, has never been proven, and they know it, and they're afraid that anybody else is going to figure this out. And so what they do is they just clump all evolutionary theory and anything that looks evolutionary together into a clump and call it evolution. And they talk about the apes and all that stuff, and the geologists know full well that these dating methods that they're coming up with on the rock, um, are not reliable, and they're always coming up with different ways of aging rock, but it's all based upon assumptions of how the rock formed, how it developed the chemical properties it did, and when certain occurrences happened in the world. It's really, it borders on being physical proof and physical myth. And as much as they hate someone like me saying it's myth, I hate it whenever they talk about Christianity as myth. And even the statisticians will tell you that for anything, for a person to be represented by 12 people, 12 apostles, that you can't fool that many people completely and have it spread like it did, because there are people from the past that are going to just be as much skeptical as the people now then. And the only justification that evolutionists have for refuting, and I'm not saying that there aren't evolutionary Christians, I'm just saying that they're supporting idea, what a lot of people there refute Christian belief systems and count it as myth, is just the wildness of the stories. And there have been some guys like Ray Comfort that says the reason why the stories sound wild is either they were true or they were designed to get rid of the arrogant that would not accept truth in any sense, whether God came down today or or in the past. And it even says in the Bible, blessed are those who do not see and believe than those who did see and believe. And because they're having to take a bigger leap of faith to believe that these occurrences happened in the past. And what really is the truth and what is the myth? The truth about this is they didn't pull all these ideas from the Greeks or any of these other areas. That's all hogwash. Jesus was a man. He did exist. The statisticians will point out that, and you can look for this. I'm not going to dig up the proof, but you can look it up, and they will say that he did exist, because the the statistical um, the statistics are um, are against. I mean, they're in favor that the man must have existed because of the amount of Christians that you know the effects it had throughout history, that no other religion really has had, on the way that our culture developed. And even the fact that we've got a sabbatical and we've got, I mean, I've talked about that we have a Saturday and Sunday probably came from Judeo-Christian religion. And I mean, is there anything of that sort that exists in Muslim or Indian, Hindu, or in Buddha or any of that? Does anything, or Confucianism, or is there anything out there that would point to um, the idea that people must be given rest? You know, that you can't expect too much of people. And I guess you would find stuff like that in Indian pantheistic, or I don't know if they have monotheistic stuff. I guess Buddha would be monotheistic, but the pantheistic idea then, and I don't see any problem with pantheism, other than that we don't believe that there's multiple gods. But if you believe that everybody has their purpose, then it's probably the reason why they have pantheistic beliefs, is that there are all these gods. But the problem is they got a lot of superstition, and the idea is that if you don't worship the right gods, then the calamity that occurs is deserved, and the communities will end up blaming those parts of the community who didn't worship the right gods. See, and and Jesus, if you look at what he was trying to say to his own people, was that the superstitions that they held were unfounded, and he took his apostles to the places where they believed there were entrances into hell, to say that you cannot find a place on earth that will send you to hell. And even though there are people that believe there are caves where you can go to hell, or in the case of the Judaistic culture of the time, there was the belief that the abyss, the abyss of the lake was an entrance to hell. That's the reason why they're afraid of drowning, and probably the reason why Jesus was walking on the water. But nobody ever asks why he was. They always ask if he was. And so, and that came by way of Ray Vander Laan. I think it was the guy who described that idea in one of his talks. He's a great guy, very positive. Not one of the Christians that you would ever come in contact that would go out on a limb to shove Christian worldview and all that down people's throats. People would probably see me as doing that, but I'm really not that kind of person. When I talk about Christianity, mostly what I'm talking about is really just to point out to Christians that you have to be careful with the world and the things that people, how you treat people, because it's going to have an effect on their acceptance of you, just the same way as what I said about climate change. So I'm going to cut this off right now, because there's some VR 180 video that I took the other day. I think it was yesterday. It was yesterday, and in the park, and I really believe that VR 180 video that I take of natural environments is going to help, say, executives or people who work in the city who need an escape through VR, and is a less dangerous form of escape than, say, taking a drug, which is an escape, but it is a detrimental escape. So